tacky does this look on camera? The coat on the back of the chair. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. It's good to see as many of you out tonight as we have. I'm Bonita Cornute, and I have the distinguished honor of serving as your moderator for this discussion between two individuals who have made a commitment to serve this new ward, the 7th Ward. It'll be new for all of us here in the city of St. Louis with ward reduction. How we will progress from this point forward will depend greatly on our leadership in each of these neighborhoods and wards. So we need to talk to them, we need to hear from them, and it's good that they've chosen to be a part of yet another forum, and I understand there have been multiple forums, but this is your opportunity to ask questions, to share your thoughts on what should be done in this community. We wanted to first start by telling you a little, asking that you know, if you don't know, take note that the committee people are also supporting this event. Amy Higgleman from the old 17th Ward, Robert Higgleman, 17th Ward, committee man and committee woman, and Queen Bird of the old 19th Ward, Sean Baker, the old 19th Ward, Vanessa Carroll, 6th Ward, and Ty Schillmeyer, 6th Ward. Kirsten Petty, 20th Ward, Mark Davis, also of the old 20th Ward. They want you to know that this is their way of giving back to the community and bringing you together and preparing you for that election on April 4th. Now, the candidates for the new 7th Ward, they're here and they want you to know what their thoughts are on certain key issues, and some questions have already been prepared. I suppose some of you picked up an index card as you came in and you wrote your questions out. I have those in front of me, and we'll get to those questions after a 2-minute introduction from each of the candidates. Then we'll have Q&A, followed by a closing statement. Our candidates tonight, Alisha Sonnier, did I say that right? Sonnier is joining us again this evening, and J.P. Mitchom. Give them a round of applause. They've made it their business to come out tonight. So the first thing we'll do is ask each of them to give us a 2-minute introduction on themselves and what their goals are if elected as alderperson for the new 7th Ward. Are the timekeepers, they're getting ready? Okay. Got that counter going, and cards to cue you if you're running a little over. And I'll just pass the mic. We have one microphone. We'll pass it down the line. Ms. Sonnier, would you please give us your opening statement?
Well, thank you so much to the committee people who put this together. I know these types of things are never easy to organize, but especially so soon after the election. So just thank you for creating this space. And thank you for everyone in the audience who's here tonight. You know, it's a busy Monday night. You could be doing anything, and you've chosen to be here. My name is Alisha Sonnier, and I want to be Alderwoman of the 7th Ward. For me, public service is not something that I do, but it has always been a part of who I am. I started after the murder of Michael Brown, and that led to me doing serious organizing around racial equity, around Fight for 15, around reproductive justice. I mean, if you can name any social movement, social justice movement that has moved through St. Louis, I have probably had a role in it and organized in it because I just don't have the ability ability to see injustices and not do anything. So a few years later, when I decided to run for the Board of Education, to some people it was a surprise since I don't fit the typical profile, but to others who knew that we had just closed 8 schools and that we were being told that we couldn't teach history in our classrooms, it wasn't quite the surprise. I've been there for 2 years and I've gotten to do some things I'm incredibly proud of, like raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, helping the district to become second in the state in starting teacher pay, and passing Prop S, which is an initiative that probably most of you here voted for, that passed at 87%, to give $160 million to schools in need. I'm running now to be the alderwoman because what I've learned now is that, I can't do much as a board member to help with the 20% of children that are unhoused or to help with the violence and trauma that they face every day in their communities. But as alderwoman of 7th, I can help make sure we take a holistic approach to public safety and have housing that is just as diverse as we are as a ward.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you to our committee people as well. My name is J.P. Mitchom, and I'm also running for alderman of the new 7th Ward. And I'm running because as I travel through the ward and knock on doors, it's becoming evident that people are tired. People are frustrated, and they're realizing that we need a more balanced approach to addressing the issues that we face in our city, a more balanced approach that acknowledges that accountability is not just something that we apply only to some, but it is a virtue that we all must embrace if we are to be a truly just and fair city. A balanced approach that acknowledges that we must be rooted in reality as we're working towards the vision of where we want to be. And so that has been my approach throughout my entire career, personally and professionally, as Director of Equity and Inclusion, as a licensed therapist, as a teacher who has taught at every level, elementary, middle, high school, higher ed, and as president of my neighborhood association. Moved back to Tiffany, actually. I grew up in Tiffany in the 80s, moved back in 2013 with my wife and 3 sons, got planted, became president of the neighborhood association, utilized my experience as an educator and as a mental health professional to do all the work in Tiffany that relates to safety, as it relates to equitable housing, as it relates to youth programming and senior services and capital improvement, as it relates to infrastructure. And so I've had that experience at a very local level, and I am excited to be able to do that for the entire 7th Ward.
Thank you. Now, something that both of you alluded to suggests that you're quite familiar with the struggles that people in the ward are facing. Through you, yourself, Ms. Sonnier, through the Board of Education, and Mr. Mitchom through your work as president of a neighborhood association. I guess one question that I have here in front of me probably speaks to what you've both described, and that is, what would you say is the most interesting thing you have learned through meeting constituents of the new 7th Ward? Anything in particular that has come to you, particularly you, Mr. Mitchom, you spoke about knocking on doors. You've been out there, you've talked to people. Tell us what you have found to be the most interesting.
Well, I just enjoy talking to people, but I would say the folks in it's been hopeful because the folks in St. Louis are very they do their research, and you can't make assumptions about this part of town or that part of town. When you're talking to people, you really get a sense that the folks that comprise our neighborhood, they do their homework, they understand the issues that face our city. And they're looking for, not just catchphrases or sound bites, but solutions, real solutions that have substance and that have the ability to work. And so I'm not surprised, but it's been enjoyable to have those conversations and to engage in that way.
I think the most interesting thing, just earlier today when I was knocking, and so often I think when people hear of me, the thing that they're most familiar with is that I'm on the Board of Education, and so that usually leads to us having a conversation about the school that their child goes to. And if it's not a public school, I find that the parent is sometimes like right away trying to explain, well, you know, I am supportive of the public school district, you know, I just made this choice. And what I found is that led to us having this very interesting conversation, I think a necessary conversation. It's your, you know, it is the city's job to make public school the choice, to make it, you know, I'm not going to doors and talking to parents, and even as a community, I hope that we're not judging each other for making the best choices for our children, but that we're having a community collective conversation about how do we make the public schools that our children go to be the best option for them. And interestingly enough, just a lot of conversations where I talk to, you know, residents and neighbors about these dichotomies that we've kind of created for ourselves not really existing, and there being solutions that can serve all of us.
Thank you. What is wasteful spending to you? That could be anything, but tell us what you believe wasteful spending is in this city, in this ward.
Okay. So I think to be honest, like I said, I've been an activist for a long time, so most of this, if you Google, you're going to find. I think the trolley and the Delmar Loop is wasteful spending. I think spending millions of dollars on you know, a project that goes up and down one lane, given, you know, like I said, 20% of our children are unhoused, people are hungry, there's a deficit for affordable housing in our ward, and we get a large sum of money and we choose to put it in a trolley that goes up and down one street that already has heavy tourism and traffic. So if I had to just give one simple answer, projects like that to me are wasteful spending. Anything that does not tangibly and positively impact the people's lives, but you are spending the people's money on it, is a waste of money to me.
Thank you.
I think for me, anything that does not, and we've talked about this before, we've had questions about development and things like that. And so for me, if it does not contribute to the overall growth of the city, if it is not asset building, then it is wasteful spending. I want to know what are the metrics, what are the objectives of any spending plan, and if it doesn't meet that goal in terms of lifting the economic floor of our city, then in my book, that's wasteful spending.
All right. Our next question, how would you support the police? The police department, I mean, just today in the news, we've learned of an officer in a nearby community lost his life. We know that it's a dangerous profession. We know that Missouri has gun laws that provide an opportunity for everyone to have a gun if they want it, with little or with limited, I'll put it that way, with limited background checks and checks and balances. What would you do to support the police in the city of St. Louis? This would be Mr. Mitchom.
You know, I think the first thing is messaging, and having the right messaging, I think, can improve morale, which what I hear is not very good right now. In my mind, I see it very similar because of my work in education with teachers, and I often share with folks, you know, do we have underperforming teachers? Yeah, sure. We don't know why they're underperforming. It could be a number of reasons why, but we need teachers, and I see that the same way. Do we need reform? Do we need to do things? Absolutely. But we need police officers, and we need to be able to appreciate them and show our appreciation for them like we do other public servants, and holding it as a both and. I think a lot of times we try to see things as black and white, either or, but we do need to see it as a both and. These things are nuanced. We do need to look at root causes of crime and things of that nature, but we also need the here and now accountability.
You know, I would support the police in a lot of, amazingly, in a lot of parts of our ward, especially the Gate District, there's a lot of city workers. So I've been able to knock doors and encounter lots of officers, lots of firefighters. And in my conversations with them, one of the things that have come up the most is just the vast array of calls that they get from 911, and how helpful it would be to have other professionals that are trained. So we have a cops and clinicians program. I'm in favor of supporting that. in expanding that so that, you know, social workers are responding, and so that people feel more comfortable calling, knowing that, you know, not just an officer is going to show up, but there's other options. Maybe it's a mental health crisis or things like that. And then also I think a traffic enforcement agency would be a great help to police officers. They get called a lot of times after the fact and have such a high amount to respond to that having a department that helps make sure that pedestrians are safe and our streets are safe would be a huge help to them.
Thank you. Thank you. In line with the streets and transportation, one of the questions asks, how can we improve transportation in the city and the region? How do we get people from point A to point B? How do we manage parking meters, as I encountered just trying to get in here? How do I pay for parking? Is the system that we're using today the best possible system? But more importantly, transportation, roads, buses, metro. What would be your suggestion in terms of improving transportation?
So the first thing on the transportation is, you know, as someone who's had to take the bus to get back and forth in the city in high school and in my beginning years of college, I know that it can take you 2 hours to get somewhere, just to get there somewhere where if you had a car, you could be there in 20 minutes. So I'm very interested in the city, us having a conversation about how do we make public transit something that is just efficient and also is better for our environment. So not only efficiency, but how do we make it something that's not just for people who can't access their cars? When I go to Chicago and I go to other cities, public transit is something that everybody takes. And so making it something that's more accessible and more friendly for everyone and not thought of as just an option for people who don't have certain resources. And then I think the other thing for transportation definitely has to be about, you know, in whatever ways we can work to help with the pay of the workers who are in charge of transit. I learned that we have bus workers that make less, my canvassers get $19 an hour, and we have bus workers that make less than that. I think that's, you know, kind of shameful. So I think talking about the pay and talking about the efficiency of the transit is really important.
Yeah, I think part of the issue, I'm thinking about a situation we had, you know, with my sons who are students in SLPS. We had a challenge with transportation at the beginning of the year, and still some throughout the year, but part of that was building capacity with those who are working in transportation. I would imagine it's the same with our city transportation, and so providing that adequate pay and to make it to incentivize folks to become employed. But I also think infrastructure is important in terms of our streets and our thoroughfares. If we don't have adequate infrastructure, it can cause wear and tear on the vehicles and the automobiles that are providing that, which then leads to breakdown. And so now you have a shortage, longer ride times. And so I think modernizing, enhancing our infrastructure and then modernizing our infrastructure.
Well, both of you spoke to items or areas of improvement that involve money. Pay increase for workers, but then also improvements to the roads. Where's that money going to come from? This is not part of that question, but I'm asking, where does the money come from? I mean, you've suggested these things are necessary. How do we pay for it?
Yeah. I think, so I've looked at the budget a little bit, but I did not memorize it. So I would have to do a little more research, but we do have, I think, some plans in place. I believe our mayor signed, I think it was a $40 million infrastructure plan. Where the money is coming from, I believe it's the ARPA money. Don't quote me on that. But these are things that I think we can do, again, to help enhance the core of our city, enhance the streets, because those things do matter as it relates to the wear and tear of our vehicles. In terms of modernizing, you mentioned your parking space out here. you know, we have the different apps and things that can make parking in various places in the city more convenient and easy. And so that's certainly an improvement instead of having to race out and put coins in, you know, in a meter. But I would have to do more research, honestly, to see exactly where that's coming from. But I think it's an important, oh, I'm sorry. I'll stop.
Yeah, so as a Board of Education member, one thing, you know, if you're in a public school in any way, you learn how to make $1 out of 15 cents. And so the ARPA funds and the RAM settlement money are coming to our city, and I think it's very important that those funds, not only should we spend them right away, but I would definitely support putting them in a mutual investment fund where the funds will grow over time. And the other thing, you know, I chair the Budget Committee on the Board of Education, and the way that we did some of the things I spoke to earlier, increasing pay, minimum wage, is places are understaffed. So a lot of budgets are not being fully utilized. So if you're telling me that you have a budget for 70 employees, but you have only 40 working, there's money in that budget that can be put to those other things. So that would be what I would, you know, go to if I were Alderwoman of the 7th, that I would say, we're underemployed, we're understaffed, let's put that money into the things that we need, whether that be city pay, city benefits, and city infrastructure.
Thank you. That was well done, both of you. Next question. This new ward will bring together a lot of different neighborhoods with a diverse number of interests and values, from Cherokee Street to Tower Grove East to Botanical Heights. How will you balance the variety of different interests within this single ward? That's assuming that there are, in fact, very different interests between these different neighborhoods.
I do think that there are varying interests, but so far, you know, one of the most amazing things of campaigning and going door to door and talking to people from so many places is that I found that a lot of 7th Ward people, a struggle doesn't have to be ours specifically for us to share solidarity with that struggle. You know, I've been to a household with a full family where they ask me questions about, well, what might you do for a single parent and things like that. For me, I think it comes down to creating places for us to talk to each other and to blend as a new neighborhood and a new community. I want to have monthly town halls so that we can gather once a month. I want to try to feed y'all because I know when food's there, I'm more likely to go. And so hopefully that'll bring our neighbors out in childcare to eliminate some of those barriers. And then also having office hours so that there's room for one-on-one conversations. For me, it's just about, as an alderwoman, being as accessible as possible and truly being in community with our ward so that all of the interests can come to me and we can have a collective conversation about what it looks like to move that forward in solidarity with one another.
So one of the things that I experienced when my family and I moved back to Tiffany, there was still a lot of hurt and pain. Tiffany was a site in the 70s and 80s of eminent domain. Folks lost their home, and when we moved back in 2013, there were folks still kind of reeling from that. And so I was able to enter into that space to bring us together as a community because there were various different visions and different differences as it relates to who we were as a community and how we should move forward. So I entered into that space with my experience to help us come around the table and heal, right? To have those conversations. I led those conversations, and to then be able to prioritize and identify how we can move forward. And from that came all the different things I talked about earlier, the youth programming, the senior services, the capital improvement. And so this is something that I do even as a director of equity and inclusion, working with different schools on social justice workshops and bringing people together.
Aldermen hold considerable sway over development decisions in the city. Quick Trip. Now, I'm not sure exactly where this would be, but this question says, Quick Trip is trying to build a new location in the ward. Do we need more Quick Trips? And what types of development do you support? What's important when considering new development?
I am familiar with this project. When it came up, it was while we were campaigning and something happened, it came up again and I got a flood of outreach for it. To be honest with you all, I don't support the Quick Trip project for a few reasons. Number one is through St. Louis University's 353, and what they told the community is this will be a community development project. What I would like for them to do is come to our monthly town hall and tell us what community service does a Quick Trip offer, and if they can outline that for us and the ward wants that, sure, let's do it, but I bet they would struggle. And then the other thing is that would be like more than the fifth gas station within a 3-mile radius. And so for me, the projects that we should, what I've heard that we should prioritize are things that fill community gaps and community needs. And if it doesn't, and you have the right to develop, you can do that, but you don't need to do that with public tax money and public dollars. So that's kind of within a minute what I can say about that.
I would just have to echo, I do not support the Quick Trip development. I did not support the Quick Trip development. Mainly because the people in the neighborhood did not support the Quick Trip development. They were responsible for, coming to us as a neighborhood. They did come, they did present. Make a long story short, we did not like what we heard, and so we did not support that. I know there were some reports that maybe that was not the case, but because we're in a 353, we knew in Tiffany that we had the last word, and our board did vote that down. In terms of development that I do support, again, I mentioned any development that lifts the economic floor of the city, so I support affordable housing. I support development that is going to contribute to historically disinvested areas of our city, so that we can move forward and grow holistically as a city.
Well, not being from this ward, I guess I'm personally not familiar with the Quick Trip development. Is it just because it is the objections that you may have? Is it just because that type of business draws people well in all times of the day and night, or the variety of people that might come through? I'm sorry, I personally am not familiar, and I don't know if the voters need to know more.
So for me, where I live is right by a Quick Trip that is 24/7, and I have not had any problems. But for me, to say I don't support is because all of the outreach that I received was from neighbors and community members who didn't want it. And then I took the time to read through the project. And again, if you're going to be a community development project, I need it to be a community development project. If you can outline for me the community service that a Quick Trip offers, let me know. But given our vast array of community needs, and given that it would be more than the fifth one within, less than a 10-mile radius, it doesn't hit the bar, for me, and it doesn't hit the bar for neighbors, and that's not what I've heard that we want in the community. So for me, that you're not really honoring your word of what you told the community it would be, and you're asking for public money to do that, and you're offering a service that is already in place. You can literally go down the street and there's a gas station. So that's why it's a no for me.
So when we met with Quick Trip, we had a lot of questions. We had a lot of concerns, one being traffic. We did a traffic study, and we were just not convinced that the traffic situation would, we felt that it would negatively impact Tiffany. There were also concerns about just a gas station and the mitigation that they would need to do and the hazardous potential of having a gas station adjacent to our neighborhood. Then there were issues of things like light pollution and things of that nature, in addition to what Ms. Sonnier said, being right next to an already existing gas station right there at the corner of Park and Grand, and understanding the variance between the two. There were just so many issues, but as it relates to how can you be neighborly or how can you benefit the Tiffany neighborhood, they did not sufficiently answer our questions with that either, with our programming and things.
Thank you. I didn't mean to dwell on that. It's just that I've never lived near a Quick Trip, and so I didn't know what the major concern was in this neighborhood. Next question. Aldermen hold considerable sway over development decisions in the city. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the same question. Oh, we're done with Quick Trip. Here, put that away. I'm so sorry. Are businesses or residents more important to you? Sort of similar. If you're thinking about leadership in this ward, if a handful of business owners come to you with concerns, but 40 or 50 residents come to you with concerns, who's more important? Or does that even weigh into your thinking?
I know. We're a community, right? And so for me, it's not a either or. Both are important. Both, have decided to take root and set up shop in our community and raise families or create economic growth. And so for me, I'm going to hit, and I would say too, in my conversations, a lot of the concerns are actually quite similar that business owners have and homeowners or those who are renting and live in a specific space. We're all in it together, is what I would say. It reminds me of the African concept of Ubuntu, right? I exist because I belong. And so my hope as an alderman and leadership is to make sure everybody feels as if they are a valued member of the community, including business owners, as long as they're neighborly.
Thank
You know, I think in the 7th Ward, we have a plethora of businesses, and many of them are the core, honestly, of our economics. In this, of all the wards, we have some of the most successful small businesses that are owned by people who live right here. And so I want to see our businesses thrive, and I want to see economic prosperity, but I also want to be honest. There are times that businesses and corporations have developed on the backs of communities and neighborhoods rather than with them. And so even in my meetings, when I'm going door to door, when I'm talking to business owners, it hasn't been a problem, but this is what I say. I serve the people of the 7th Ward. I work with businesses. I may work with developers, but I serve the people of the 7th Ward. So if it ever comes down to it and my residents are telling me this is something that they want and business owners are telling me something different, for me as alderwoman who's responsible to the people in the community that I'm creating, it's my job to make it clear that we've got to find a compromise or we have to go with what the people say.
Well said, both of you, and diplomatically handled. Next question. We're back to the roads. Aggressive driving, often by motorists of all shapes and sizes, has reached a zenith. Many vehicles have no or expired plates. If elected, how can you help address that? Now, licensing is provided by the state. We would think that the police are responsible for enforcing violations. I don't know for sure what that really should look like. But the question is, given what we know is happening on our city streets, people have been injured, seriously injured. There have been major crashes. And it's just frightening if you are unprepared to see someone shoot right in front of you when you have the right of way. And then you find out that there's no license on that car. What would you do about that situation if you are elected?
Yes, so I had some real cute stockings picked out for today that had some bedazzlement on them. But when I was walking out of a meeting out here earlier and I was crossing the street, I almost got ran over and I had to move and I fell and got a hole in my nice cute stockings as well as a scab. So it is incredible. The driver didn't stop. The driver didn't see if I was okay. Honey, they just kept going and I'm certainly not getting reimbursed for my stockings. So for me, I think that we've reached a point with our traffic where it's at a crisis. And I think that we have to treat it like that. That's why you keep hearing me talking about the development of a traffic enforcement agency, because I think that we have to have some accountability, and I think that our police are very overwhelmed and overswarmed with what they have to do with violent crime. So I want to get some support, and I want to get some accountability and some security on our streets so that people feel like it's not okay for me to just run somebody over or potentially run somebody over and keep going. So a traffic enforcement agency is one of the things that I would definitely, I really want to see.
So I live in Tiffany at a major intersection, and so I often see the road speeding past stop signs actually, and it's actually right next to a park where children play. So that's no fun, and I think I'm open to piloting certain creative solutions, but it reminds me of in education when kids are in the hallways, they're in unstructured time, anything can happen if you do not have supervision. And so I do think we have to have a presence. I also think we have to look at the data. It is important, I think, to have a department where we can collect that data, whether it's through folks calling in or technology, cameras. But I think we have to be able to focus on where are the majority of these issues happening and deploying a presence in those spaces to hold folks accountable. I think if you're bold enough to not run somebody over, you might need some strong enforcement and not just someone that does not have authority.
I smiled to hear both of you describe personal situations, and I think everybody in the room could refer to something that has happened to them on an individual basis. I wonder, as I look at this and I hear people talk about it, I wonder if it's time to return to the cameras that we'd have that were outlawed and determined illegal, I guess, by our state legislature. Is it time to return to that approach when you speak about enforcement and monitoring and keeping an eye out for those folks who are violating the laws? I don't know. How do we change that? I mean, how do we put that camera out there without running into that same problem that we thought we had taken care of maybe, 3 years ago when they put a stop to using those? Am I making any sense? Okay, yes, please.
Yeah, I don't mean return back to how it was in terms of like issuing tickets and things, but I do think that it could be a tool for us to gather data to understand where are the spots in the city where we need to have more presence and deploy more presence with authority, if that makes sense.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you both for your answers there. We're coming to, and if you in the audience have additional questions, please feel free to speak up. We'll let you raise your hand and answer those questions. If something that's been said here up till now needs clarification for you. Yes, did you have a question? I suspect the microphone might help, I don't know.
Hello. I just want to give a scenario. Hi, I'm Nicole, and I do work for the city. I lived in Harlem for a while, and I remember I want to go back to the police and being in the neighborhoods, and there were a few abandoned buildings, and the police would come to the community meetings, which was awesome. And I remember they had keys to the abandoned buildings. Is that allowed here, and would you let it get that intimate and that where so they have that access? Because I know some property owners might be concerned and all that, but they would have keys to these buildings because the community was very serious about them getting in if they had a problem property. Do you know where I'm going with this? Okay.
I don't know the context in Harlem, but I think the problem that we would have with that in St. Louis is that a lot of the vacant properties are owned by people who don't necessarily live here. They buy them in swath and they actually wait for them to deteriorate and, decrease in value and then they often come back and ask for tax money to help with that property. So I don't know if that would be an effective answer. And also I work as a mental health advocate. And so my other concern would be a lot of people who are in those vacant buildings are oftentimes, substance use people. And so although I understand when to keep vacant buildings clear, I think we also have to be careful about how we might be dealing with the unhoused or the substance use population that might be in those buildings. And I don't know that police officers are the best trained to deal with those folks. Like from where I grew up, where there's vacant buildings all the time, those are the folks that are often inhabiting those buildings. So those would be some of my concerns with that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure how that works here in St. Louis, but as it relates to, I know that there's a concerted effort to make sure we adequately board up buildings, and I think there's folks who go out periodically to assess how the condition, or if it's been somehow compromised where folks are in there. But in that case, I think they do somehow interface with the police department. But I think right now our approach is to make sure the buildings are adequately boarded up. In terms of the impact that it has on the community, I know I've heard conversations of problem properties, and there's a process for that so that folks who are living out of town and just sort of not being neighborly can hold on to that property. That's a matter of injustice, in my opinion. So if elected, I would certainly pursue that process with full strength to make sure that folks aren't getting over on us.
Yes, sir.
I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. I think that's the case for many of our schools in the district. A lot of the schools, even the ones that are closed, or even some of the ones that are in use, they're not used to full occupancy. I think you see a good example of that at Sonnier High School, where, it's just, in the 1960s, we had a population of 800,000. It's 300,000. You can see that in the enrollment in the school. And they are on a closing plan, but we were able to have conversations with, community members in that area and with the mayor's office and with SLDC. And now we have a Northside Economic Empowerment Center that operates in the annex of that building. So to me, I think that's exactly where you're talking about, where this space is not being fully utilized. We wanted to keep its current utilization of who it served, but what are some of those other gaps? And in that case, there are business owners or, aspiring entrepreneurs who don't necessarily have access to the same resources as others in other areas. So let's put it in this school, let's put it in an annex, and let's bring these services directly to those folks. And as Alderwoman, I would support doing that 100% with properties in our ward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we have a lot of great ideas, especially as it pertains to our youth. I would like to see us, reinstitute. I understand back years ago in the 70s, St. Louis City, and it's actually in our charter. We had a children's or a youth component where we did a lot of that work ourselves. And so recreation centers, things of that nature existed back then, have since been closed. Would like to see a decentralization of a lot of the services that we have in our city so that we can be more localized to the various neighborhoods. Shouldn't have to travel, all the way across town to have access to a good team or a recreation center. So what I would like to see is for us to utilize that space. We talked about wasteful spending or wasteful real estate, if you will. We can repurpose some of these buildings to achieve a lot of the social vision that we have.
Is that time or a question? Question, yes, ma'am. The timekeeper has a question.
How do you feel about, I know it's not a good question to ask, but how would you feel about making it mandated that your policemen and your firemen, the people working in the city of St. Louis, live in the city of St. Louis?
Residency.
I don't know who's first. I don't know who's.
I guess. You know, I mentioned it before. I think that I believe that everybody in the community should be vested in that community, should be rooted in that community. So I would be in favor of folks needing to live in the community because I'm a relationship person. That's just who I am, and I think that if you have strong relationships, you can leverage those relationships. You can have a greater impact if you live in that community. So, as it relates to police officers and firefighters and city employees, I think it speaks volumes that you have set up shop and you're rooted in the community that you work and serve in.
I'm in favor of the people who serve here, living here. I also think, though, that as a leader, you have to figure out how you can provide supports for that. So I would love if that's something that we decide to do. We talk about incentivizing home ownership, maybe a down payment assistance program or something like that to make sure that, if we're going to require that they live here, that we make it as accessible for them as possible. And that's even something that, I've been interested in doing on the Board of Education. So I think just having that balance and then also priority being given to folks who live here, but at the end of the day, we want effective, efficient services. And so if we were to do that and then we have understaffing and it's not filled, but we've taken all of the applications from the city, then maybe it's time to talk about opening up because we need staff and we need capacity.
Yes, sir. Did you hear?
The question was, what would your ideal Grand and Graveway be? And he mentioned some cyclist accidents and tragedies that he'd seen. I mean, honestly, right now it's hard to get to ideal because it's just literally unsafe. So I don't even think my mind is like, right now I would like us to just be able to cross the street safely. Right now I would like for it to, have clear pedestrian places. I would like some traffic calming measures to be in place. I think the ideal can go a lot farther than safety, but as Alderwoman right away would be safety, just decreasing accidents with automobiles. And I would love some protected bike lanes to be in that area. It's so busy, and I've seen that there be a lot of tension sometimes between those folks. So I would say right now, ideal could be developed with the community, but I think we all want safety right away and for it to be a safe place to navigate through since it's so central.
Yeah, I would say ideal is a space where the business community is thriving. Our residential community is seen and patronizing the businesses, but in order to do that, you have to have a strong foundation. And I think that strong foundation starts with the infrastructure, making sure that we have the traffic calming measures in place. But also, like I said before, it's a both and. Yes, we need strong infrastructure because that will draw businesses, but we need a presence as well. A presence that I think is informed by tracking the data patterns to see where in that corridor are we seeing the issue so that we can have presence and accountability with authority, if that makes sense.
I'm going to read this last question. It would apply to both of you, given what you've done with other organizations, but very specifically, the question to Mr. Mitchom is, what has 2 years of being president of a neighborhood association taught you about city government? And Ms. Sonnier, what has being on the school board taught you about city government? Working with these different organizations, have you learned anything new about how our city works?
I think it's sometimes, and this is really what I want to be able to work on, but that, working with city government, city officials, folks, they do the best that they can, but we're working with a whole city with a lot of moving parts. And so sometimes, when you make requests or you have projects, things happen quickly, and sometimes when you make requests, there's some delay. And so what I would want to work on is consistency and reliability. And sometimes it's no fault of anyone other than you're just dealing with a system that has a lot of moving pieces. And I know that we've talked about this in various forums in terms of modernizing a lot of our city services, cutting down on wait time, 911 call. I was just talking to a person today. There were some shots fired in Botanical Heights, but the folks were put on hold for 911, even still. So, yeah.
To be honest, I'm just going to tell the truth. One of the things I have learned working with city government, honestly, is that because our systems are so antiquated and so outdated, and so many of them are. I mean, if you're applying for a job, in the city, you should be able to go to a clear portal, a clear space. You should be able to see my application is being reviewed. HR has it right now in 30 days, but we don't have any of that. And so instead, which we all know about St. Louis, is very relationship based. I found that I will pull up to your office and I will say, hey, I asked about this 2 weeks ago. I sent you an email about this a month ago. And whereas me and maybe everybody in the department has tried to make a moves, we didn't get any results until I went in person, raised the question, and built the relationship with the head of that person. So I've learned that relationships and advocacy are really your friend in our city. And then the second thing is that, we like to throw the buck sometimes. I talked about the unhoused earlier. We like to say, well, the county does this, the city does this, and sometimes we don't take accountability that we are the only ones that are going to solve our problems.
Thank you both. I think we've put in an hour here tonight, and you've answered the questions, I thought, extremely well and thoroughly. So we'll give you this last opportunity to close out the evening with a 2-minute closing statement. What do you want to leave these voters with in terms of, oh, we have another question. I'm sorry. Okay, well, sir, yes, go right ahead. And your question would be,
I support community gardens. I love community gardens. I'm not a gardener per se myself, but sometimes when I just find it very peaceful to kind of put your hand in the ground, but I always tell my grandma, like, look, I have these nails now, I can do a little something, but not too much. And also I think, I'm on the board of education, so a lot of things go back to kids. I mean, I think what gardening teaches, the science process, the way that brings something together, you have to learn how to take care of something from A to Z. And also my favorite part about it is that you have everything that you need right there, as long as you are giving it the consistent treatment that it needs. You also asked about where some community gardens are. The community garden that I know of just got cut out of the new 7, so there was a community garden that was like right up the street from me on Russell that I used to kind of go by all the time to like talk neighbors, or when I would be like walking the dog, would see. It's not a part of the 7th Ward anymore. It's cut out, literally that street. But I would be happy to do some research and look for some community gardens about where they are for you.
Thanks for the question. I think we have a community garden in Fox Park it's off of Shenandoah, I believe, or Russell. I think it's Russell. It's Russell.
Got cut out.
That's not part of, I think that, and then Botanical Heights has a huge community garden. But yes, I'm 100% for community gardens because I think it flows or it aligns to the idea of sustainable development and long-term growth and residual development and sustainable development. So I think that that would be something that we should certainly look into. Oh, Gravois Park. Sorry, Gravois Park has 3.
Gravois Park. So what you saying is you're gonna give us a tour?
Well, I will say that I have personal experience with community gardens, not that I'm a candidate or anything, but I will confirm that it is, in fact, a community building opportunity. I'm living in, now I don't know what the ward is, but over by Skinker to Bolivar. And we have a community garden across the street from my house, and I did it for about 8 years until my knees got bad and I just couldn't bend and keep it up. But it is a beautiful, wonderful, absolutely perfect experience for community building. And you know where you have grown those tomatoes, you've grown the cabbage. So I would encourage you in the 7th Ward to really think about, if you don't have that many, it's worth taking the time to invest in it, honestly. It brought the neighbors together. You knew who was down the block, and you shared tools, you shared opportunities, you shared your food. If you had too many tomatoes, you gave them to the person in the box next to you. It's a good experience. So let's go to our closing statements, unless there are other questions. All right. I only put a couple of dollars into the parking meter out there, so I do need to wrap it up. All right, closing statements.
You start. I think I started with opening, so I feel like.
Okay. Just want to thank you all again for coming out, for taking time to be here. You could have been anywhere. Just want to say, I would love your consideration on April 4th. This is a key time in the history of our city, and we've got to get this right, because what we do can sort of set the trajectory for the next 50 to 100 years, if you will. So we got to get it right, and what you're getting in me is someone who has a lot of leadership experience, a diverse, litany of experiences as a director of equity inclusion, as an educator, as a president of my neighborhood association. I am very proficient in working with groups of people with differences, and these are not petty differences. These are differences of which people have strong conviction. And I have a lot of experience with bringing people together to find creative solutions to complex problems, and an independent thinker. Is that 1 minute or stop? Okay, and so that's been my experience throughout my career. I have a proven track record with that. You can ask the folks in Tiffany, and I am very much excited and looking forward to the opportunity to doing that in all 7 neighborhoods, who I believe already have a nice foundation. Most of the neighborhoods have strong neighborhood associations, and so building that capacity to expand to our greater community, I think, is one of the first priorities that I'm very much looking forward to doing in the 7th Ward. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you all for being here. You guys have been such an interactive crowd, which is really helpful. It's really hard when you're like staring and people are just straight-faced the entire time. So thank you for the smiles and the affirmative nods. You know, on April 4th, 2023, you are going to make a choice. And you are going to make a choice that will impact the 7th Ward in the city of St. Louis for at least the next decade. You're going to make a choice that decides when you call the police, do you get an answer, and who responds to that choice? You're going to make a choice. Are we going to continue to have a city with at least 20% of our children unhoused, or are we going to have a housing market that's as diverse as we are? You're going to make a choice. How do we approach, you know, the unhoused community, and how do we deal with crime? Do we talk about the roots issues? Do we put things in that are long-term and short-term options? You're going to make a choice that is going to dictate, you know, the city and the trajectory and what we are and who we become. I'm asking that when you go, you make the choice for me, because not only do I have a heart for social justice, which is proven in my track record as almost being a community organizer for 10 years, but I understand legislation. I have passed it locally. I have passed it statewide. I've had a hand in some federal policy. I understand budgets. I chair the budget committee for an institution with a $432 million budget, and I've gotten some tangible wins on the board. I understand the nuances of political relationships and navigating how to address things publicly and privately, and I know what it's like to be the person's go-to. And I would argue that that's the leadership that the 7th Ward deserves. We deserve someone who understands legislation, who understands commissions, who knows our needs, and who has the ability and who has receipts for getting the job done. And I would say that on April 4th, 2023, that is me. Thank you.
Thank you both for coming tonight. And I know this isn't your first rodeo and may not be your last, but we certainly appreciate the fact that you've come out tonight. Alisha, Sonnier, get that correct, and JP Mitchom, candidates for 7th Ward Alderman and or Alderwoman. I don't know that it matters. Does it matter if you make the distinction?
No, I just say Alderwoman.
Alderwoman, thank you for coming and being a part of this discussion tonight, and thank you all for your presence and your participation. Thank you.